Eleanor Wright's fingers trembled as she dipped the worn pen into the last drops of ink. The February wind howled through the cracks of the Boston tenement, and she pulled her threadbare shawl tighter around her shoulders. At 23, she'd already buried her parents, lost her factory job, and watched her younger sister succumb to illness. Now, with rent 3 weeks overdue and her landlord's threats growing darker, she had one choice left. The advertisement had been crumpled in her pocket for days: rancher in Wyoming territory seeks respectable woman for marriage. Room, board, and honest work guaranteed. Reply to Samuel Thornton, Sweetwater Station. She'd laughed bitterly at first. What kind of desperate man advertised for a wife? But desperation had a way of making strangers into saviors. Dear Mr. Thornton, she wrote carefully, her letters neat despite her shaking hand. I am writing in response to your advertisement. I am 23 years of age, of sound health and moral character. I can read, write, and manage a household. I have no living family and no prospects here in Boston. If you find me suitable, I am prepared to travel west and fulfill the duties of a wife. I ask only for kindness and a roof over my head. Respectfully, Eleanor Wright. She didn't mention that she owned only 2 dresses, both patched beyond recognition. She didn't write about the nights she'd gone to bed hungry or how she'd sold her mother's wedding ring just to survive the winter. Some truths were too heavy for a first letter. 3 weeks later, a reply arrived with money for the train fare. Miss Wright, your letter showed character and honesty. I'm not a man of many words, but I can promise you a home, respect, and hard work. The ranch is remote, but the land is good. I expect a partner, not a servant. If you can accept a simple life and a quiet man, come to Sweetwater Station. The train fare is enclosed. Samuel Thornton. Eleanor read the letter 5 times, searching for hidden cruelty or false promises. But the words were straightforward, almost blunt. She appreciated that. She'd had enough of pretty lies. On a gray March morning, she boarded the train westward with everything she owned in a single carpetbag. As Boston disappeared behind her, she felt no nostalgia, only the cold terror of the unknown mixed with the faintest flicker of hope. The journey took 6 days. Eleanor watched the landscape transform from crowded cities to endless plains, from gray industrial smoke to impossibly blue skies. She shared bread with other passengers, slept sitting up, and wondered constantly what kind of man Samuel Thornton would be. Would he be cruel? Old? Ugly? Would he expect things from her she couldn't give? When the train finally pulled into Sweetwater Station, she stepped onto the platform with her heart hammering. The town was barely a town at all, just a handful of wooden buildings clustered around the railroad tracks, surrounded by infinite prairie. A tall man stood near a wagon, hat pulled low, shoulders broad beneath a worn coat. He turned as she approached, and their eyes met. Samuel Thornton had a weathered face lined by sun and wind, brown eyes that were careful but not unkind, and calloused hands that he kept awkwardly at his sides. He wasn't young, perhaps 35, but he wasn't the monster she'd feared. Miss Wright? His voice was low, rough from disuse. Mr. Thornton. She clutched her bag tighter. I'm here. He nodded once, then reached for her carpetbag. Welcome to Wyoming. The ride to the ranch took 2 hours across open country. Samuel drove the wagon in complete silence, and Eleanor didn't know whether to feel relieved or terrified. She'd expected questions, demands, perhaps even advances. Instead, he focused on the horses and the rutted trail, occasionally pointing out landmarks without explanation. Creek's there. Ranch is just beyond that rise. The ranch, when they arrived, was smaller than she'd imagined but sturdier. A log cabin with a stone chimney, a barn, corrals for horses and cattle, an endless sky in every direction. It was the loneliest, most beautiful place Eleanor had ever seen. Samuel helped her down from the wagon with stiff formality. I'll show you the house. Inside, the cabin was Spartan but clean. One main room with a fireplace, a kitchen area, a table and chairs. A door led to a single bedroom. Eleanor's stomach tightened. Samuel noticed her expression. "I'll sleep in the barn until we know each other better. Or until you decide to leave." He said it matter-of-factly, without self-pity. Eleanor blinked in surprise. "You'd let me leave? I won't keep anyone here against their will." He shifted uncomfortably. "There's a town 10 miles east. Preacher comes through once a month. We can marry then, legal and proper, if you're willing. Until then, you're free to go anytime." She studied him carefully. His clothes were worn but mended. His boots were scuffed but cleaned. The house, though simple, showed care. This wasn't a man drowning in chaos, this was a man who'd been alone too long. "Why did you send for a bride, Mr. Thornton?" He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Finally, he spoke, looking out the window rather than at her. 5 years ago, I had a wife. Mary. She died giving birth to our son. He died too. His voice was flat, controlled. I thought I'd stay alone. But the ranch needs work I can't do by myself. And the silence. He paused. The silence got too heavy. Eleanor felt something crack inside her chest. She understood loneliness. She understood grief. "I'm sorry for your loss," she said softly. He nodded once, then cleared his throat. "There's food in the cellar. Chickens out back for eggs. I work from sunrise to sunset, but I'll be nearby if you need anything." He moved toward the door, then hesitated. "I'm not good with words, Miss Wright. But I'll treat you fair." "Eleanor," she said. "Please call me Eleanor." The ghost of something, not quite a smile, but close, crossed his face. Samuel. Over the next days, Eleanor learned the rhythms of ranch life. She cleaned the cabin thoroughly, cooked proper meals from the supplies Samuel had stocked, mended his worn clothes, and tended the chickens. Samuel worked from dawn until dark, repairing fences, tending cattle, breaking horses. They spoke little, but Eleanor noticed things. How Samuel always filled her water bucket before his own. How he left wildflowers on the kitchen table one morning without a word. How he sat on the porch each evening, watching the sunset with an expression of deep solitude. She noticed, too, how he flinched when she moved too quickly near him. How he kept his distance, careful never to touch her, never to impose. This wasn't a man who'd take anything from her. This was a man who'd been broken by loss and was terrified of causing pain. On Sunday evening, as they ate dinner in companionable quiet, Eleanor made a decision. "Samuel, when the preacher comes next week, I'd like to marry you properly." Samuel's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. He stared at her, brown eyes wide with something like disbelief. "You sure? You've only been here a week." "I'm sure." Eleanor met his gaze steadily. "You've kept every promise in your letter. You've been respectful and kind. I've been cold and hungry and afraid, Samuel. I'm none of those things here. That's enough for me to build on." He set down his fork carefully. "Marriage is permanent, Eleanor. I won't divorce you, no matter what. You need to be certain. Are you trying to talk me out of it?" She raised an eyebrow. "I'm trying to be honest." He looked down at his hands. "I'm not an easy man to live with. I don't talk much. I get lost in my own head. The winters here are brutal, and the work never stops. You deserve to know what you're choosing." Eleanor felt unexpected warmth in her chest. Even now, giving her an escape route. "Samuel, look at me." He raised his eyes reluctantly. "I'm choosing this. I'm choosing you. Not because I have no other options, but because in 1 week, you've shown me more respect than any man in Boston ever did. You work hard, you keep your word, and you're honest. That's more than most women get. So yes, I'm certain. The preacher married them on a bright April morning with 2 neighboring ranchers as witnesses. Eleanor wore her better dress, washed and pressed. Samuel wore a clean shirt and looked terrified. When the preacher said, "You may kiss your bride," Samuel gave her the most chaste peck on the cheek, his face blazing red. That night, he still went to the barn. "Samuel," Eleanor called from the doorway. "This is your house. Come inside." He turned, silhouetted against the stars. "I don't want to pressure you." "You're not pressuring me. We're married. Come inside." They lay beside each other in the dark, careful not to touch, both rigid with nervousness. Finally, Eleanor started laughing, soft, helpless giggles that she couldn't contain. "What?" Samuel sounded bewildered. "We're married and acting like terrified children. It's absurd." After a moment, she heard a low rumble, Samuel laughing too, rusty but genuine. "I suppose it is." She reached out in the darkness and found his hand. His fingers closed around hers, warm and calloused and gentle. "We'll figure this out," she whispered. "Yeah," he agreed quietly. "We will." The season turned toward summer. Eleanor planted a garden, learning from Samuel's terse instructions. She learned to read the sky for weather, to help with calving, to ride the gentle mare Samuel brought her. Her hands grew calloused, her skin tanned, and the hollow fear that had lived in her chest for years finally began to fade. Samuel remained a man of few words, but Eleanor learned his language. Coffee made exactly right meant good morning. Wildflowers on the table meant I thought of you. His hand on her shoulder as he passed meant I'm glad you're here. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky impossible colors, Samuel spoke suddenly. "I was afraid to hope again," he said. "After Mary died, I thought that was it for me. But you, Eleanor, you made this place feel like a home again." She leaned against his shoulder, and his arm came around her naturally now, without hesitation. "You saved my life, Samuel. I was drowning in Boston. Here, I can finally breathe." We saved each other, then. By autumn, the ranch was thriving. The cattle were healthy, the crops were good, and Eleanor's garden had produced more than they could eat. She'd learned to preserve food, to make soap, to help Samuel with the heavier ranch work when needed. But more than that, something had shifted between them. It started small. Samuel began talking more, telling her stories about the land, his childhood, his dreams for the ranch. Eleanor shared her own painful history, the factory, the tenement, the desperate hunger she'd tried to hide. "I used to think poverty was my punishment," she admitted one night. "Like I'd done something wrong and this was my fate." Samuel pulled her closer. "There's no such thing as fate, Eleanor. Just circumstances and choices. You chose to come here. You chose to stay. That took courage. So did bringing me here. You were risking your heart again. Best risk I ever took." The first snow came in November, and with it, isolation. The ranch was cut off from town, just the two of them against the winter. Eleanor had feared the loneliness, but instead found intimacy. They worked together, talked through long evenings by the fire, and discovered that partnership could transform into something deeper. One night, Samuel came in from the barn shaking snow from his coat. Eleanor had hot stew waiting and the fire blazing. As he sat down, he looked around the cabin, the curtains she'd sewn, the rug she'd braided, the books on the shelf, the warmth and life she'd brought, and his eyes grew bright. "What is it?" Eleanor asked softly. "I love you." The words came out rough, almost pained. "I didn't mean to. I thought I was too broken. But Eleanor, I love you so much it terrifies me." She knelt beside his chair, taking his weathered hands in hers. "Samuel Thornton, I love you too. I think I have for months, but I was afraid to say it. Afraid it wasn't real, or that I'd lose it." He pulled her up and kissed her properly for the first time since their wedding, deep and desperate and full of all the words he couldn't say. That winter, they were happier than either had imagined possible. When spring returned, Eleanor discovered she was pregnant. Samuel's face went pale, then anguished. "Eleanor, I can't lose you." "When Mary?" "I'm not Mary." She took his face in her hands firmly. "We'll get the doctor from town. We'll be careful." "But Samuel, we can't live in fear of grief. We have to choose to hope." Their daughter was born in early autumn, healthy and loud, with Eleanor's eyes and Samuel's stubborn chin. They named her Hope, because that's what they'd given each other. Years later, as Eleanor stood on the porch of their expanded ranch house, watching Samuel teach their 3 children to ride, she marveled at the impossible journey. From a cold tenement to this vast, beautiful land. From hunger to abundance. From loneliness to a love that had grown slowly, rooted in respect and watered by daily choice. Samuel caught her watching and smiled, the real smile she'd coaxed out of him over years of patient love. "What are you thinking?" he called. "That I'd choose this every single time," she called back. He rode over, leaned down from his horse, and kissed her soundly. "And I'd choose you, Eleanor Thornton. Every single time." The prairie wind swept around them, carrying the laughter of their children, and Eleanor felt nothing but grateful. She'd thought poverty was her fate, but this quiet cowboy had shown her a different truth. Fate was what you built with your own 2 hands and a brave heart.